All right, so in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between syntax and semantics. So in case none of you are familiar with what syntax is, we say this a lot in programming. Syntax is the structure of our language, just like in English and Spanish and whatever language you want to talk about. We have certain rules about how the language is supposed to be structured in order to make sense. So this is things like what defines a word, right? So in the example of English, we have to have vowels every so often in order to make words actually make sense. We have certain ways we put sounds together in order to make reasonable words. The next thing we can talk about with syntax is grammar. All right, so grammar is things like how you do punctuation. This is about how we incorporate quotes, how we incorporate sentence structure, such as how do we do, like, what constitutes a good sentence in English. For English, this is going to mean that we have a subject, we have a verb, and we have some sort of thing that the verb is acting upon usually, right? If we do adjectives, this is saying that we put the adjective before the word that we describe, right? So if I say the red ball, then you know that the color of the ball is red, and you know that this is probably going to be the subject of the sentence that I am about to say. In Spanish, you put the language in a different order. You put verbs usually after, sorry, you put adjectives usually after the nouns in which they describe, right? Casablanca would be White House, and it starts as casa being house, blanca being white. So you see how that's different. In programming, we have a lot of similar differences with our syntax, right? If we compare Java to C++, for example, you'll note that we have differences in how we define a class, what exactly defines a class, where variables are allowed to be defined, right? Where we put semicolons or brackets sometimes. If we compare that then to Python, Python doesn't use semicolons at all, doesn't use brackets. So that's what our grammar is in programming. So this is what we're talking about in syntax, particularly with programming languages. All right. So next, we need to talk about what semantics is. So semantics is a little bit harder to define. Semantics is about meaning. All right. So this is the definition of words, right? Not just that a word exists and it makes sense as a sound, but the actual definition of a word is semantics. This is about the meaning or purpose of language. Okay? And this is true for programming as well as for actual grammar rules in like an English course, right? We have these two different things. We have syntax and semantics, and they kind of work against each other. Syntax allows us to put structure to what we write, and semantics allows us to put meaning to what we write. Now, it's important to remember in Java that, or really most programming languages, that syntax is enforceable. Okay? What that means is the compiler can determine whether or not these things are correct. Okay? When it comes to semantics, this is not enforceable. Okay? So what that means is if you have a method that says, let's look at that equals to method we talked about a little while ago, right? So if I do like an equals method, right? And I say that this is some object, right? And I'm just going to return a Boolean. Now, you would think that this method is going to do a particular thing. You think that this method equals is going to return a value that indicates whether or not this object is equal to my current object, which ideally is true. But Java cannot enforce that rule. That is up to you as a programmer to make sure exists. So this is something that programmers are responsible for, not for the compiler, not the language, but the programmer who's actually writing the code, determining what methods are called what. That's your job, is to determine the semantics of the program and what's important here. And this is going to become important in a minute. We're going to talk about the comparable interface and why making sure you understand the importance of your semantics is key to doing certain things in Java. So the next video, we're going to talk about the comparable interface. It's probably going to be a bit longer of a video. So make sure that you understand the basic concept of interfaces and of semantics before moving on.